You can spend years learning a language in school and still never be able to have a single conversation. I'm Jamie, I'm a language coach. Let's talk about why language classes don't work and what to do instead. The first reason why language classes don't work is that you're being taught to pass tests and exams, not necessarily to have conversations. And of course, right now we're talking about language classes in like high school and college and not necessarily in immersion schools when you go abroad. Thing is, when you're learning languages as an extracurricular activity, when you're like getting a degree in something else, the point isn't for you to have conversations. The point is for them to be able to assess your ability to take exams. Think about it. When you learn languages in school, what are you doing? How are you learning languages? You're probably learning to translate vocabulary words. You're learning how to conjugate verbs appropriately. You're learning how to be able to point at a picture of squirrel and know how to say squirrel. Maybe you have an oral exam, maybe you are being tested on your ability to communicate verbally, but you're still being tested with objective values. And the thing is, languages are not objective, they're subjective. Communication isn't based on following strict rules and being able to prove that you can follow these strict rules and that you understand and can communicate these strict rules. Communication is a lot more fluid than that. There's no really strict rules in real life language learning, but that doesn't really function in the academic setting. In order to make education easier for teachers and for students, you need to be able to get an A+ or an A- or a B or fail. And in order to do that, you need to be able to have certain benchmarks that will get you to that A+. And because fluency is a relative term that you can't really necessarily grade easily, it's much easier for teachers to be able to mark off if you're using certain vocabulary words, if you're using certain conjugations correctly, things like that. Because you have to realize teachers are also being assessed on their ability to teach their students to conjugate appropriately, to memorize these words, maybe to understand literature or something like that, but of course that's more advanced classes. So in order for teachers to prove that they're good at teaching and for students to prove that they are good at learning, you need to have a black and white, very strict assessment. And of course, that is a completely different approach to languages than I might have if I go abroad and decide to try to have a conversation with native speakers. In real life, nobody's going to sit me down, give me a piece of paper, and ask me to translate 17 verbs. The next reason why language classes don't work is because you as a student have absolutely no say in the method. You have no say in what you're learning or how you're learning it. The only way that you have any input is by choosing the class that you take, and depending on the reason why you're in school, you likely don't have a whole lot of choice in that either. When you are in these language classes, you are given a strict syllabus, you have strict expectations to meet, and that probably includes a lot of textbook work. And if you don't like textbooks, and if you don't enjoy learning through textbooks, and if the skills that you want to learn are not really easily taught via textbook, then you're SOL. I mean, I personally really enjoy textbooks, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people are better off with conversations, just throwing themselves into social situations and figuring it out as they go. But when you're learning a language in school, a lot of the time you don't have that opportunity. If you find textbooks really boring and your brain just kind of turns off, you gotta deal with that, and you just gotta hope that you can memorize things long enough to take the test and then let it fall out of your brain. When I work with my clients in the method, on the other hand, I help them understand what options are available to them and how to understand which ones they'll actually enjoy using. Obviously, this is a complete opposite of these language classes where you get a textbook and you are basically told, study, take these exams, pass. If you don't enjoy that, too bad. The next reason why language classes don't work is that your success is dictated by how perfect you are. The way to succeed in a language class when you're learning a language in school is to not get any questions wrong, to get 100% on all of your assessments, and to communicate clearly and fluently. And if you get something wrong, or if you make a mistake when you're having a conversation, you're going to get marked down for it. You have to prove that you can successfully speak with perfect grammar, great pronunciation, and a large vocabulary list. But that's not realistic at all. That's not how foreign language communication works in real life. In real life, nobody cares if you're perfect or not. Actually, the more perfect you are, the weirder it sounds. Because not only do native speakers make mistakes when speaking all the time, literally I make so many mistakes in these YouTube videos that you probably don't even notice because you just kind of ignore it. I'm a native speaker. You can tell that I'm a native speaker. So who cares if I make mistakes or not? But even if native speakers are communicating perfectly, we have this tendency to do this thing called word mincing. Word mincing is the basic idea that native speakers tend to shorten their words and their phrases so that they can communicate more effectively, more efficiently, without having to pronounce every single sound perfectly. A good example of this is a native English speaker like myself would never say, "What are you doing?" In real life, I'm going to say, "What you doing?" The words are completely different, the sounds are completely different, and in the academic setting, in language classes, that would technically be incorrect. That would be wrong because I'm not saying the words with perfect pronunciation. But in real life, nobody speaks perfectly. By nature, we want to communicate as quickly and efficiently as we can with these phrases that are so everyday that nobody's really paying a whole lot of attention to them. So we don't use the perfect pronunciation that you're expected to use when you're in school. If you've tried to learn a language in school, you've learned how to use a language in a way that normal, everyday native speakers do not use their own language. You'll find it used that way in academic settings only. And if you make the simplest mistake that in real life would be totally ignored, that is the difference between an A+ and a B. The next reason why language classes don't work is because they have to treat language learning like a cookie cutter formula. They have to teach everybody languages in the same way. The same methods, the same expectations, the same tests, everything. Everybody has to show up to the same classes at the same time in order to achieve the same grade, learn the same concepts, and prove that they've learned the same concepts in the same way. But in reality, that's not what language learning is. Language learning is fluid and is best learned in whatever way works best for you. And the method that you choose to learn a language is going to completely dictate your success. Because if you are trying to make yourself learn a language through strategies that don't work for your own interests, your own learning styles, and your own goals, it's not going to work. You're not going to enjoy it as much, so you're not going to stick to it as long. I know a lot of language learners want to pick up a textbook and be instructed on how exactly to learn a language from day 1 to day 1,000, but unfortunately, languages just aren't that way. Real life language learning is more like those choose your own path storybooks where you decide to choose what happens next. The next reason why language classes don't work is unless you're in a private class, you are forced into a group dynamic. Now, obviously, some people really love the group dynamic, but some people just do not function well that way. But the thing is, when you learn a language in school, you don't have any choice. For example, the flow of the lesson depends on who's asking the most questions, what questions are being asked, what everybody is struggling with. So if you pick up on a topic really quickly, really easily, but you're the only one in the class who does, you have to wait for the rest of the class to catch up with you. This can be really frustrating, really boring, and it can be a real time sink. This is especially true if you're already familiar with a closely related language. A lot of grammatical concepts, maybe pronunciation, depending on the languages, are going to be a lot easier for you to pick up than a lot of people in your group class. Group classes also mean that you're relying on your fellow students, which can be good but can also be bad. Depending on your teacher, this could also mean things like group projects. So if you don't really thrive in that environment, then you're, again, kind of SOL. And again, in real life language learning, there really is no such thing as a group project. You either can understand and can communicate fairly decently, or you can't. It's not really reasonable to be able to bounce your ideas off your peers and figure out how to communicate when you're in a real-time conversation. The next reason why language classes don't work a lot of the time is because there are very limited options for real-life immersion. Now, obviously, this varies from experience to experience. For example, in my experience, I had absolutely zero immersion, but I know that some students are more fortunate to have a little bit of immersion. But the point is that immersion is really crucial for real-life conversations. While having things like oral exams and guided speaking practice aren't bad, it's not at all like a real life conversation. And so a lot of students find that even though they do really well in their exams, once they try and have a conversation, none of it comes out. Meanwhile, if you're learning a language outside of the school setting and independently, you can absolutely choose to immerse in whatever ways that you choose. You can have language exchanges, you can watch shows on Netflix, You can watch YouTube videos. You can listen to music. There are so many opportunities for immersion strategies available in the world that you just don't get access to when you are learning a language in school. And so unfortunately, when you are learning how to learn a language in school, you're not learning realistic methods. You're not learning what's actually available to you out in the universe. So now that you know why language classes don't work, what do you do instead? My first suggestion is to watch this video. When you've learned to learn a language in school, you've learned how to learn vocab in a way that you can be tested on translations, but unfortunately that's completely different from how to learn vocabulary so that you can use it in real life conversation. So click on over and I'll see you in that video.